In this video, I'm going to be talking about Redshift render setting. Okay, so you can find render setting right here. Okay, so Redshift render setting is actually pretty easy, so it's artist friendly. So if you go to the tab itself, like there's not much for you to set up. Okay, so this is a very general setup for Redshift. So let's say if you want to do some batch animation render, you need to tick this thing on. Okay, so what it means, like it will render from the frame that you put here, so it's the start frame, until frame maybe 100. Okay, and it will goes one by one. So that's what it means. And padding means how many digits that you have to put as a file name. So right now it's set to 4, so there is like 4 digits. So if I change this to 2, we only have like 2 digits. And here you can type whatever file name you want, and then like Redshift will update it for you. Okay, and again, like you can define like from which camera the render should be happening. So in this case, it's set to perspective. So if you add more camera, you can choose the respective camera from here. And again, resolution is something that is like very important. You need to refer to the assignment spec, which resolution is required for your submission. Most of the time, the lecturer may request this, but again, it may be different from one module to another. Okay, and again, moving on, under this miscellaneous, I usually turn this thing off, enable default light. So what it means, like if we have this thing on, even without having light in the scene still bright and lit. Okay, so that's something that that we don't want, because we want to have manual light that we can tweak and edit. Okay, so if we have this thing on, it's very difficult to set up or edit the light, right? Because the light that is default, it's not there for you to select. Okay, so make sure this thing off, and when you render the first time, everything becomes black, and that is correct. No light in the scene means it's black. Okay, so moving on, we have this thing output. Okay, so again, like most of the time, we're just gonna leave the setting the way it is. Now, one thing for you to edit is that like this one here. Okay, so when you want to submit for your assignment submission, you probably want to increase this to a higher value. Okay, so maybe 32 and 64 is good for you, but it really depends on the result of the rendering. So if the rendering is still very noisy, you probably need to increase this to a higher value. Okay, again, for the submission of your assignment, this kind of render can still be improved. I mean, right now it's still like very noisy. Okay, you can see like a very obvious noise happening all around the servers. Okay, and again, I want to put like the way it was, just for demo purposes. And again, sample filtering is just like how the Redshift will do the blurring for you. Okay, so if I zoom in here, as you can see, like there is blurring happening between the sphere and the background, and this line here in between is actually blur. Okay, and there is like a calculation for you to do that. Alright, and that's how you change the sample, or the blurring type here. Okay, I usually leave the way it was, the setting. Okay, so under sample filtering. Okay, so gauze is enough for me. Now, moving on, we have this thing, sample override. Okay, so before we understand how it works, we need to just create a simple scene. So I have my plane and my object, and I have just few light. Okay, something like that. Now, in this scenario, I purposely make the light sample. Okay, one of them is area light, and the sample is 1, and this one I have my directional, and I also put the shadow to 1, so the result is very noisy. Now, the purpose of having this sampling override is that later on you're gonna have more complex scene. Okay, you're gonna have more object, you're gonna have more light. Okay, and there's gonna be a time for you where things are noisy and you have to get rid of the noise, and it's very difficult, like what's causing the noise, because again there are different type of noise. Okay, so some of them may caused by the reflection noise, alright, some of them may happen or caused by refraction, or maybe the AO value too low, or maybe even the light sample, like I'll show you, is too low, or maybe even the volume or the subsurface scattering is too low. Now, by having this function, alright, it will override the sample of that respective area. So if you want to bump up the reflection quality, you can tick this thing on. Okay, so what it does is it will increase the quality that regards to the reflection. Okay, so this function is created for artists to debug the scene, because in this scenario you want to hunt down or you want to fix out what's causing this noise. Okay, so let's try, like maybe I'm going to increase my light sample, alright, because okay, I'm gonna put like 128, because I know like this noise is probably caused by my light. So again, I'm gonna save this image and I'm going to render with this thing on. Okay, and again you can tell like, oh, this thing probably caused by the light value being too low. Okay, so you can turn off this and then go back to the respective light and then like fix the problem. Okay, so this is just a temporary function for you to see like what's causing the noise. Okay, so if I render again, this will go back to the way it was. And again, like maybe we can try on the reflection. So right now it's set. Okay, so this is the way it was, and I want to set it to 128 and we render. Okay, so reflection is only responsible for that region. Okay, and if I compare, so this is before and this is after. So if you want to affect this one as well, so you might need to increase its light sample. Then you can also compare this rendering time. Okay, again, motion blur is something that you probably know already. So motion blur is something like this. Right, so if you have like a character being animated and you want to have like a blur when they have an animation, you can turn that feature inside the render setting here. Okay, and there are settings for you to play with. Gamma, I usually leave it on, or just leave it, the way it was, right? From here downward, everything is just default setting. Okay, we can talk about the lens in the next few weeks. Okay, this one you don't touch because it's required for Redshift to calculate the rendering based on this number. AOV is a rendering process that you're going to be doing for your next assignment. So this is what people usually do when they do a rendering process. Okay, you actually create or render this one by one. Okay, and in this case, this guy rendered 8 times. Yes, it's tedious, but then the payback is that you have more control over the passes. Okay, so far we only do like ambient occlusion passes, but in the future you probably need to do different kind of passes, right? So that way, like the artists have more control over the color that they can do to the final result. Okay, so that's done under AOV. Okay, this one we don't touch for now. This is just like how the Redshift are supposed to render things like the hair trace. Okay, GI, we're gonna cover that next week, and also and photon, and this is subsurface scattering setup, and this one also you don't touch. Okay, because if you touch, you may mess up. But only one thing that I usually do is that this bucket, that's probably the only attributes that I change. So by default it was 64. So basically what the bucket means is that little box that goes around in this direction, spiral, when it's rendering. Okay, right now if it's 64, that means the box size is quite small. See how it's only 64 by 64. So if I press escape and I change that to 56, the bucket or the box that goes around, it's much bigger in size. Okay, so if you want a faster result, then you probably want to change the bucket to a bigger size. Okay, in memory also you don't touch. This is like all automatic setup for you. Okay, so that's pretty simple rendering setting. And if you want to do a batch render, all you have to do, you go to rendering, drop down, then you go to render, then you perform the batch render. So it will take whatever setting that is being put in here. Okay, so it's very simple for Redshift.